Seems like there's something going on in the world today, and I feel it more and more. The old system that we were handed is broken. It's not working for people anymore. And God is starting to raise up a new generation of creators, artists, dreamers, builders. Naval Ravikant put it well. He said, there are over 8 billion people in the world, and my hope is that one day there'll be over 8 billion businesses. Now, is it realistic to think that every person in the world is going to have their own business one day? Probably not. But the point is, anybody can have their own business now, and that's been made possible by advances in technology, the internet, online, social media platforms. Anybody can build an audience. Anybody can put their work out into the world. And there's never been a better time to become unemployable. Now, you might be saying to yourself, that doesn't sound very spiritual, or that sounds unbiblical. Well, I want to look at a story from scripture that I think is going to challenge that assumption. And it's the story where Jesus quite literally calls the disciples to quit their jobs and follow him. As I sit here at the edge of this beautiful lake, I can't help but think about all the times throughout scripture that God uses water as a symbol to call people into something outside of their comfort zone. I think about Noah, who built an ark, and through his obedience and faith, God created a new beginning for the world. I think about the Israelites, who were called out of Egypt to walk through the Red Sea, that God parted and made a way for them. I think about all the times in the New Testament when Jesus uses water to demonstrate his authority over creation. He is baptized at the Jordan River, and when he comes up out of the water, the Spirit of God in the form of a dove rests upon him. Jesus' first miracle, he turns water into wine, and this demonstrates the beginning of his public ministry. So many times Jesus is with the disciples on the water, and they are lacking faith, and he brings control and order out of chaos. But there's a particular story that I want to look at from Luke chapter 5. And this is when Jesus is at the edge of the lake, and he looks out and he sees these fishermen in their boat who have been toiling all night trying to catch fish, and they've come up completely empty. And Jesus steps into the boat with them. He says to them, why don't you try casting your nets to the other side of the boat, into the deep water? And Peter looks at him and questions this a little bit. And you can imagine that he gives him a bit of a side eye when he says, we've been out here toiling all night and we've come up completely empty. But if you say so, we'll give it a try. And so they cast their nets into the water. Of course, they pull up their nets and they're over brimming with fish. In fact, so much that the nets are completely tearing. And of course, we know what happens next. They go to the shore, and Peter and the disciples leave their nets behind. They leave their boats and they follow Jesus. And this is the beginning of a great adventure for them. It's not a call into a life of drudgery, into a life of soulless activity. It's a call into mission. It's to become the first apostles and the early founders of the church. And of course, eventually, most of them died a martyr's death. But it was a great adventure. And that's what we're all called to. That's what the call of Jesus looks like and feels like. And for some reason, we Christians believe that when Jesus calls us to pick up our cross and follow him, that this means we're giving up all joy and wonder and adventure. And that is the complete opposite. God has called us into this life of discipleship. He has called us into a great mission and a great adventure. And that's the point I want to nail home when looking at this story. And if we are called to a creative career path, if we are called to start our own business or to be an artist and to start our new thing, whatever that is, we are going to be just like those disciples in the boat. We are going to be just like Peter, probably giving Jesus a bit of a side glance and saying, what are you asking of me here? And so this story is an opportunity for us to reflect on how Jesus is calling us out of the comfort of what we know, out of the comfort of what we're familiar with and what feels safe and secure, into the great adventure that is discipleship, that is our true, authentic calling. Especially if you're someone who feels like what you've been doing for a long time is just not working. You've been toiling for a long time and you've come up empty. You feel like your soul is empty. You feel like your mind is not being challenged in the way that it should. You feel like your creative gifting is not being expressed or articulated in the way that you desire, in the way that you know God has created you to create. Of course, we know that Jesus calls us to pick up our cross and follow him. And we know that that's not going to be easy. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be hard. It's going to mean a certain death to ourselves. We know that we're putting ourselves in a vulnerable position to possibly be hated by the world. But we've got to understand that when Jesus calls us into the deep water, that is where we are going to find our mission. That is where we're going to find the most provision, the most abundance, the most blessing. We are putting it all back on Jesus. We are putting it all back on God and saying, I trust you. I have faith that even though what you're asking of me does not make sense logically in my brain, the historical evidence is not there to support that, I'm going to trust you. And so when I talk about becoming unemployable, what I'm talking about is not running from what's hard. It's not about becoming irresponsible. It's about moving into the deeper purpose and meaning that Jesus has for our life. And so when we look at that story of the disciples in the boat and we think about the deep water in our own life, we think about those areas where we look and we say, that doesn't make sense. That's not logical. That doesn't add up. We know that we can trust Jesus. We can trust that it's there in that deep water where we're going to find the most purpose, where we're going to find the most meaning and the most joy. Not because it's going to make us rich, not because it's going to make us superficially happy in some sort of sense, but because it's where God has the opportunity to show up the most. It's where we give him room to provide the most for us.
Okay, so we've stood at the edge of the water. We've heard God's voice. We know he's calling us deeper into more purpose, more meaning, more joy. But how do we actually do it? What practical steps do we need to take to put ourselves in a position where we can actually live this out? That is not an easy question to answer, but I want to try to tackle that a little bit and reflect on some concepts and ideas that I've been thinking about in regards to my own life when it comes to this topic. There's a concept that I want to talk about that's really helped me reframe and shape the way I'm thinking about my career and the future of the life that I want to build for me and my family. And that's a term called anti-fragility. It's a concept that was developed by author and philosopher Nassim Taleb. And in his book called Anti-Fragile, he talks about this idea of two different systems, really two different modes of being. One is called fragility, or a fragile system. And the fragile system is one that might look safe and predictable on the outside, but is actually extremely vulnerable to the smallest little crack in the foundation or break in the system. One little wrong turn, one little unexpected disruptive event can throw the whole thing out of whack. A lot of us saw during COVID just how fragile a lot of our systems were. Our jobs, our homes, our supply chains, the food we eat, the money we make. I think for a lot of us, our eyes were opened to just how fragile and vulnerable our lifestyles really are. Now, the opposite of a fragile system is called an anti-fragile system or anti-fragility. And that is a system that not only can withstand unexpected events or circumstances, but it actually gets better from stressors and from challenges. It adapts and it evolves and it gets stronger when unexpected things put some pressure on it. And so you think about your muscles, for example. When you work out or you lift weights, your muscles start to tear and you actually kind of hurt your muscles. You put stress and pressure on them. But that's actually what causes the muscles to get stronger. Your muscles heal and they come back bigger and stronger and better for it. So that's the idea of an anti-fragile system. And when I think about how you and I can apply that to our careers or our lifestyle or our family life, it has to do with this idea that your source of income or your livelihood or the work that you're doing to provide for yourself and your family is not dependent on one system, especially a system that is vulnerable to the tiniest little crack or breakdown, totally throwing the whole thing out of whack. I mean, I think about a corporate organization working for a big employer where it might feel like there's a lot of comfort and security and stability in that, but one downturn in the economy can cause a massive layoffs. And overnight, you could be out of a job unexpectedly. Now, for a long time, the systems that I think we've set up in our society have worked for us, but we all know that things are changing. The future is looking more and more uncertain, whether that's the economy, the advancements in technology, AI, all of the global conflicts that are going on. We don't know what the next 20 to 30 years are going to look like. In fact, we don't know what the next 5 to 10 years are going to look like. And that's where my urgency is coming from in this idea of becoming unemployable within the next 6 to 12 months. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to quit your job tomorrow. That doesn't mean that in the next 6 to 12 months, you're going to be self-employed and you're gonna have this dream life built out. What I'm talking about is starting to put the pieces in place, starting to strategize and think about what you want your life to look like over the next decade, what you want your life to look like going forward, starting to analyze your own life and think about where are those places that I'm vulnerable, where are those systems in my life that maybe I'm a little too dependent on. For me, that was starting to realize that when I was working for an employer, and that paycheck from my employer was my only source of livelihood. If I didn't have that paycheck, I didn't know how I was going to pay the bills next month. I didn't know how I was going to pay for my house. So that is a situation that I definitely don't want to be in the long term. For anybody who has a passion for something that wants to pursue an alternative career path, I think that opportunity is not only getting better, I think now is the best time to be thinking about it. I want to build a lifestyle and a career path where I have a diversified set of income streams. I have multiple assets or different sources of leverage that I'm using to provide for me and my family. And that's the opportunity we have as creative people. We can think creatively. We can think outside the box. We can have some vision to look forward and say, not only do I want to set up a life that's resistant and resilient, but I want to set up a lifestyle where when those stressors come and when those complications or complexities inevitably come in life, I'm not only prepared for it, I'm getting better from it. I'm learning from it. I'm adapting. And that's going to take some intentionality and kind of pulling ourselves out from the current default system that's been set up for us, which we all know is very fragile and very vulnerable to stressors and change and uncertainty. When you're talking about a creative career path, when you're talking about doing art, starting a business, this is unknown territory. This is going to take a leap of faith. This is a path that everybody has to walk on their own. My whole point with making this video was not to get you all excited about some sort of pipe dream up in the sky that's not attainable. I actually do believe that you can become unemployable within the next 6 to 12 months, or at least start making significant steps towards becoming unemployable. 7 months ago, I was still employed and I started this YouTube channel. I didn't know what would come of it. I just had a hunch I need to start creating something of my own. Well, just a few months later, I was unexpectedly laid off. And so I now had some time to put into this channel and really start to put some effort into it. And over just a matter of a few months, the channel has started to grow. I'm building an audience. I'm sharing my journey with you. And now this is becoming something very viable.